Welcome to Dignified Family Transitions with Lilie the Lawyer.
Welcome to Dignified Family Transitions with Lilie the Lawyer. Lilie McRoberts is a Minnesota family law attorney and mediator who helps individuals and families navigate divorce and custody matters with a focus on problem solving, not conflict, and practical, respectful solutions. I'm Lisa Mosbey, and today we're talking about property division in divorce and how couples can work through those decisions without going to court. Welcome, Lilie.
Hi there.
Lilie, let's start with a definition. What does property division look like in divorce cases when both parties are trying to reach an agreement?
Yeah, so property division frustrates me because in many ways, property division really should be the place where you can kind of remove a little bit of emotion from the equation. But oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it becomes very emotional. Property division is the portion of the divorce that you don't have to worry about the children when you're doing property division. So you would never have a property division section of a divorce decree if you were only establishing a parenting time and parenting and custody. But you have to, first of all, determine what the marital property is. And so for definitions, the first place that we would start would be marital property. Marital property is going to be basically everything that the parties own. We think of there as when a person marries, from that moment until the moment that they separate, which is the valuation date in Minnesota. It defaults to being the valuation date as the date that they have the first hearing, but it can be argued that it's the date of separation. From the time that you get married to the time that you separate, you have one marital estate. And that is really hard unless you have a prenuptial agreement. And even then, sometimes you don't have that. And so then by definition, everything that you accumulate in that marriage is marital property. And that is the presumption, and there are very few exceptions to something not being non-marital property if it falls within that period of time. And the burden of proof of proving that something is non-marital is the person who's trying to say it's non-marital. And so the court is going to look at the marital estate as being just one unit. And so property division really should be very formulaic. And one of the things that helps, I think, to take the emotion out of it is to, first of all, do just an information gathering session, which is probably the most stressful part of the divorce, is all the paperwork that you have to gather. And that's the first part of the divorce, is all the information. What all property do we have? And then the second part is going to be determining who, dividing that one marital estate into two estates.
Lilie, can you speak to what kind of assets are typically need to be addressed during this whole process?
Yeah, so pretty much everything. I mean, and not only assets, but liabilities as well. So bank accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, 401ks, all the retirement accounts, money markets, businesses. Like if you own your own business, you may or may not have to get that business valued. You may have to get an expert to come in and value that. Baseball cards and personal property is all of that is potentially an asset. So we're talking about information gathering. There is just sometimes people don't have very many things, but it's even things that you don't think about, like, you do cleaning on the side and, you're earning an income. And so you also have to disclose your income and, other incomes that you've had in the past. You need to get copies of your tax returns. And like, I'm making it sound very daunting, but just like anything else, you break it down into pieces and it's doable. And it's nice nowadays that you can get a lot of this information online. Some of the things you can't get online. Some of the things, especially depending on how long the divorce has been going on, you might have to go back pretty far to get. But yeah, an asset is pretty much anything that has value. And then you also have to disclose all of your marital debt too, and all of your non-marital debt. So any debt that you have as well.
A couple others that come to mind for me are jewelry, artwork, the cabin, the RV, the boat, the ATV. Like there's so many things to think about. You just look around and it's like all of it. We have to decide all of it. And what's the value of it?
I mean, we have to figure out what to do with pets. How do we do that? I mean, at least with kids, we know that we can't divide them, but like pets are considered property. And that's really hard for a lot of people.
So how do couples decide what's fair when dividing all this stuff up?
It's really tricky because only the two couples know what, some things are easy to place a value on. And a lot of times sometimes you have to get appraisals done, not just for homes, but for like collections and for antiques and things like that. But then the hard part is some of these things have real sentimental value, and that's where the emotion comes in. And so what we often see will be a couple coming in and they know that they want to keep what's theirs and the other party wants to keep what's theirs. And in their mind, that's fair. And I really like to honor it when people come together and they are in agreement on things, but we still need to put everything out there. And that's when it can be really hard because like, I put everything in a balance sheet where we can see down to the penny, who is getting a little bit more value than this and a little bit less value than this. But I can't know how important that, Mikasa picture that you got from your grandmother is worth. I don't even know if they made Mikasa back then, but but you can. And so I like to do where the personal property, the judges hate dividing personal property. They hate it when you're going to trial over deciding to do something with personal property, and they don't like doing it at all. I really like it when my clients can at least agree on, well, what is in my possession right now is for me, and what's in his possession right is his. And then we don't have to focus on the personal property because that's probably the hardest thing to figure out and put a value on. And what's also really difficult is you're not going to be able to claim that the property is worth what you bought it for. You're only going to be able to claim fair market value for the property. So if you just bought a $15,000 sectional couch, 2 months before you got married or were getting divorced, and you both want to keep it, and because obviously you want to keep it, but you can't decide, and you go to trial, the judge is going to say you're going to have to sell it, and you're probably only going to get $5,000 for it, and then you're each going to get $2,500. So maybe you guys want to figure this out on your own. But it's important to understand that the courts, they're going to evaluate every judgment that they get in front of them, every stipulation that they get in front of them, to make sure that it's considered equitable. Now, equitable does not mean equal, but equitable just means that it's fair, and that's going to be a question of fact that goes to the judge. So really, the better you know someone, the better, the easier it's going to be. And then just let's try not to pick your battles, I think is the best advice that I can get. Because if you're going to the court and you're losing your mind over something that was given to the other party, like an Afghan that was crocheted by the other party's grandmother, you're going to lose a lot of credibility with the judge. The judge is going to think that you're fighting on everything. So yeah, pick your battles and don't fight over something that the judge is going to think it definitely belonged to the other party.
That makes sense. And, does the equitable rule apply to retirement accounts, investment accounts, financial assets, those types of monetary accounts, or are they just evenly split? Are there some guidelines, some rules when dealing in that arena?
Yeah, there are. No, the retirement accounts are marital property from the time. I mean, if you were earning on that retirement account before you were married, then you're going to want to get an estimate of what the retirement account had in it before. And then there's actuarial services that you can usually get to determine exactly what that retirement account would be worth. It's really tough. So what we do is we have attorneys, we have a Excel spreadsheet usually is great. And we put all the assets in there, and then we get an idea for how much one party has more than the other party count in their individual accounts. It's all marital property, but like we figure out who wants to keep what accounts. And then we look at the asset that has the most, and that's the one that we try to divide. It's better to not divide every single thing, because every single thing requires certain, especially retirement accounts. Most retirement accounts, you have to get a separate order that's called a qualified domestic relations order. And only certain attorneys do those orders. And so you don't necessarily want to divide every single asset that you have. If you have checkings and savings accounts, it's going to be a nightmare to divide every single one of them. So you want to look at what's the least, like what asset has the most. However, you usually need to get an expert, because some of the retirement accounts are pre-tax versus post-tax. So it gets really complicated. A lot of times, if it gets too complicated, I end up getting an expert, because I'm not the greatest when it comes to those accounting things. So it's really better if you can come to an agreement on those things. But yeah, you have to, you don't want to say equally, but the retirement accounts are going to be one of the things that are going to have to be, divided equitably. So it doesn't usually make sense to just split them in half and split all of them in half. But sometimes people really just want to make sure that it is down to the penny equal. And they'll pay experts thousands and thousands of dollars to get it down to the penny equal. So if both parties want to do it, then do it.
Yeah. It's just that you spend so much money on experts and legal fees and all those other things, and I'd rather be putting that in my pocket. But, to each his own. Everybody has to go through their process in their own time, their own way. Speaking of which, if couples get down to it, they've agreed on almost everything, but they get stuck on one or two items. What do you do? How do you get them over that hump to get them through that process of getting it all done?
Well, I mean, you have to look at it like let's say that it's a business. Sometimes you really do want to pay to have the expert appraisal.
With a business, I would.
I mean, if you're gonna just sell your home and divide the equity, you don't need to get an appraisal. Because I mean, you're still gonna have to put in the divorce decree what you think it's worth, but as you can pick a number and both agree on that number. Like, let's say we're going to use the tax appraisal number, but if you're not going to sell the house and one person wants to stay in that house, they're basically going to have to, for lack of a better word, buy out the other person for the equity. You need to get it appraised. It would be terrible advice for me to say, oh, just use the Zillow number. Because it could be $50,000, $100,000, like it could be really far off. And frankly, let's be honest, the appraisal values are not perfect either. The housing market fluctuates all the time. So if one of you owns a business and there's, the inventory in that business isn't so hard to figure out, but there's so much, like there's goodwill and that you can't put in money, and you're going to want to get an appraisal done. And I mean, you don't have to get an appraisal done if you're in agreement on everything, but if I were an attorney and I looked at that, I would say, let's hire someone to do an appraisal on that business. So other businesses, you don't need to. So if you can't agree on something, but you really don't want to go to trial, let's just take a step back and go back down to let's just gather more information and let's just make sure that we have all the information that we need. Sometimes getting an appraisal is a great place to start, because a lot of times when people are disagreeing or they're not able to come to a conclusion, it comes down to one of the parties or both of the parties are probably missing a few pieces of that puzzle. But once those pieces go into place, then they can come to an agreement. And the other thing is to take a step back and also remind ourselves, what happens if we can't agree? Well, what happens if we can't agree is we lose control and it goes to a judge. And then that trial is going to be probably 6 months to a year out. And then it's going to be another 3 months before we get the judgment from the judge. And then we're stuck with it. And let's maybe take a step back. Do we really want to do we want to take our own individual trips to Paris, or do we want to make it so that our lawyers can go to Paris?
That's a great reference. Oh my gosh, that one totally landed for
I
me.
didn't make that up. A lot of judges give that lecture when they're having those initial meetings with the parties. So yeah. And I'm a lawyer, but I would rather they get to take their kids to Paris, frankly. I really truly am of that opinion.
It's just healthier for the family when they can do things together and find a way to agree. Not be right, but it's not a right or wrong. And you've said this before, it's equitable. It's like, how can we be as fair as we can? And how can we work together and be on the same side?
Yeah. And finding common ground.
Yeah, finding common ground. What do people most often overlook when they're dividing property in a divorce?
I think that the hardest part for me, it frustrates me, and I said this a little bit last time, is the fact of the matter is that a lot of times people really just want to work together amicably. I mean, we always hear the bad side of divorce, but there are a lot of people that are like, I don't even care. I just want to get it over and done with. I want to just rip the Band-Aid off. And so then they come to agreements, and then they don't really understand what their rights are. And so then when they find out what their rights are, then it kind of derails sometimes the agreement a little bit. The other thing is that there are so many nooks and crannies where property exists, virtual nooks and crannies where property exists, that you don't realize it. And so that's why one of the nice things is I have a list that I give my clients of all the documents that I'm going to need. But like things that you don't think of that are actually personal property that we have to disclose. The 280ZX that's been sitting at your grandparents' house for 15 years. That you're probably going to disclose that, actually. But like things that you don't think about that are in other people's possessions, and so then you find out that you have to list that, and that can be hard as well. And so probably the biggest thing, though, is just there's so many different things that you need to list on those disclosures that you don't always think about.
I think my takeaway today is be patient. Don't get stuck, get help. There's somebody out there that can help you mediate this. And remember, if we can't agree, we give up control. And you've said that in this episode, you said that previously. I think that is the greatest lesson through all of this, is that let's make the decisions ourselves, not give it up to an attorney or give it up to the judge ultimately. So thank you so much for your insights. It's always such a pleasure, and I always take something away. Thank you.
Thank you. It was so good to see you again.
That's it for today's episode of Dignified Family Transitions with Lilie the Lawyer. If you're navigating a divorce in Minnesota and want to explore a more thoughtful, problem-solving approach to property division, you can learn more about Lilie McRoberts and her work at minnesotasfamilyattorney.com. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to leave a review, and come on back next time. We'll be here.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.